Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to another really special release and courtesy of what I have here, which is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format edition of a title, or I should say a duo, two titles, which are under a collective spine number designated by Criterion of 1207. And so today I'd like to focus our attention on one such film, and it is the first film in this duo of films, and it is described as being from the year 1993, and the name of the filmmaker is Johnnie To. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me, I'm going to do my very best, but I'm very terrible when it comes to my pronunciation of the language. I hope you can forgive me. But the name of the work is Dung Fong Sam Hap, or as it's known in English, The Heroic Trio. This is the work, the amazing, wild extravaganza, chock full of entertainment galore film with a lot of twists and turns as well, and a great martial arts spectacle with a lot of heart and a lot of pathos and wonderful rapport between and among the characters here in question. And it is described as being from the year 1993, and the director is Johnnie To, with the producer and martial arts director Ching Soo-tung, and screenplay by Sandy Shaw, with a wonderful cast. Included in which are, for example, Anthony Wong and Damien Lau and James Pack. And then heading this wonderful cast, we have a trio in question here. The trio, really dynamic group of actors, performers who portray these characters in a larger-than-life way, each in their own respective ways. So we have Anita Mui and Michelle Yeoh and Maggie Cheung. Oh, what a dream team this is in this film, which is, and please pardon me for my very bad pronunciation of the language. I hope you can forgive me. But Dung Fong Sam Hap, or as it's known in English, The Heroic Trio. So here we have the Criterion Collection releasing The Heroic Trio together with a sequel, a companion film called in English Executioners. So two films under a single release, under a single spine number. The spine number here being 1207. Please note that the films don't have their individual spine numbers, but that's okay, that's not a problem. We'll talk a little bit more about, say, the second film, Executioners, in a separate video discussion. Also, this is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition, which means we have the 4K disc, one 4K disc which houses both films together. And then we have a Blu-ray disc for each film. So one Blu-ray for The Heroic Trio plus its supplements, and then another Blu-ray for Executioners plus its supplements. What I happen to have in the player at the moment behind me is the Blu-ray for The Heroic Trio, just to showcase the way in which The Heroic Trio, as it's set off individually, can be shown here in this wonderful sort of orange-red motif with our main players, Maggie Cheung and Anita Mui and Michelle Yeoh, sort of front and center in this wonderful proclaimed way. It's really fantastic artwork, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. So now let us focus our attention, if I may, on the Heroic Trio and also the supplements and the presentation with respect to the Heroic Trio. And we'll have a separate discussion with regard to Executioners in a later video. So the Heroic Trio, how do we talk about or approach the wonderfully entertaining film that is To Heroic Trio in terms of its plot or story structure. I think we can begin in terms of we are in sort of a modern day contemporary urban setting at the very outset. And we have house hunting, a real estate house hunting that opens up the film. And this introduces to us already the characters Anita Mui and Damien Lowe's character. And so we also understand that there is an effort on the police and the authorities, and Damien Lowe's character being part of that quite directly, to try to put a stop to or try to solve a number of crimes involving kidnapping newborn children. Which itself is a very quite disturbing prospect. That's in many ways a kind of front and center aspect of the plot of this film. So children, newborn babies are being kidnapped. And so the police are trying to put a stop to this and trying to solve these crimes, and but they keep happening as a type of serial kidnapping epidemic. So we are not quite sure what's going on at the moment, but we know that the inspector, the police are on the case or on the trail as best as they can. But that's not all, because we also have the character of Anita Mui, who is who has leading a double life, which we also find out almost immediately in terms of she's credited in some versions as the as Wonder Woman, and so it's a type of superhero who is also living under a type of hidden or secret identity. And so this adds, I think, a lot of fun and a lot of pizzazz to the proceedings. But also, Anita Mui's character must also, through some plot mechanics, try to find the solution or try to come to grips in terms of what's going on with the epidemic of newborn baby kidnappings, because she becomes emotionally and quite personally invested when a certain, say, mishap arises that causes a great deal of tragedy and sadness. And so, and also there might be some personal connections, some deep-rooted personal connections and backstory overlap that may come to fruition as the film progresses. So already we have on the scene a kind of superhero spectacle with a larger-than-life type of plot that has sinister undertones, but it's going to get even more sinister. It's going to get even more larger than life, and thus it's going to become so over the top and zany to be absolutely a wild, incredible ride. It's so fun and unbelievable. It's great. It's absolutely great, because we also have introduced here a number of other characters. So we have the character of Maggie Chung, and in terms of who's sometimes referred to as a thief catcher, and she brings a great degree of spunk and a liveliness and a sense of a type of motorcycle coolness to her character. So she, through a number of plot mechanics, becomes embroiled in this ever-developing, super complex plot. And that's not all, because we also have, on the other side of the coin, in terms of protagonist and antagonist, a character portrayed by Michelle Yeoh. And there is some kind of power of invisibility that is also revealed early. And this seems to be the tool that she seems to be using in terms of what she is doing with regard to this earlier plot that we were talking about earlier, the kidnapping of newborn babies, being kidnapped by some kind of invisible figure. Well, here we have Michelle Yeoh's character being this type of antagonist figure, a villain figure, if you will, in this plot to kidnap these babies. What is the plot about in terms of this? We get a little hint of this as well in terms of a type of crypt underworld area, and a character referred to in credits as Grandmaster, sometimes referred to as Evil Master, etc. And this is relating to a plot that is involving the kidnapping of babies and a linkage with the destiny of a child growing up to be the emperor. And so there is this lineage, emperor lineage, that's linked to a subterranean villain's lair and a grand master supervillain with whom Michelle Yeoh's character, who has a power of invisibility, seems to have is in cahoots with, and so acting in kind of evil, nefarious ways. But there's also room for the development of, for instance, the antagonist Michelle Yeoh's character, not just in terms of various dramatic points that perhaps show a kind of regret or possibility of change or or a type of influence by the forces of good in this film, but also there is some romantic or emotional involvement in terms of another character played by, for instance, James Pack, the great James Pack, by the way, and to whether or not Michelle Yeoh's character will lead down a trajectory of continued antagonistic behavior, or whether there might be a change. You'll have to watch the film to find out. And what of the Maggie Cheung character and her motorcycle antics and her own superhero antics, and what will become of her, and the maybe uneasy relationship between and among the characters, including Anita Mui's character, the superhero with a secret identity, but is also this Wonder Woman character, masked figure, but a hero who tries to save the day, and perhaps is faced with her own limitations and also her own relationship with the police inspector, who may or may not know who she is, in terms of behind the mask. And so we have a wonderful genre handling here in terms of the superhero dynamic and the secret identity, and knowing and not knowing who the secret identity is of the superhero, etc., while battling supervillains, and also the supervillains having their own agenda, but also there might be the possibility of heart and emotion in terms of the Michelle Yeoh character, as well as the spunk and drive and the motorcycle hijinks antics that are just so fun and so dynamic galore that are introduced with Maggie Cheung's character. And what of the other characters? I mean, I also have to mention the great Anthony Wong. Great Anthony Wong here, one of the great performances as a almost a villain that is also roguishly lovable in the way that his physicality seems to have no limits. And so I'll leave it at that in case those who haven't seen the film, you won't want to be surprised. And it's one of the great performances. It's so funny. It's so creepy and weird. It's absolutely great. What a great performance by Anthony Wong here. As well as the other performances. This film is, again, the trio of Anita Mui, who is fantastic, who shows this dilemma of who she is both with mask and without mask, and as a superhero, the choices that she has to make and the sacrifices that she has to make in order to further her own, say, pursuit of justice, even if it means the loss and destruction of things around her. And also there is a kind of quest that Anita Mui's character seems to be on in terms of her own, not just secret identity and handling the secret identity, but also her past and her childhood. And maybe there might be some linkages between her childhood and, say, other characters that we come to meet, and what will make of the relationships when these revelations of paths are revealed. Like, aha, it rises to the level of great, grand, legendary, mythic proportions that is so apropos entertaining superhero genre entertainment's delight. This is absolutely fantastic. The mythos and the backstory is just, it's developed in a way that's so absorbing and entertaining and engaging and feeling so organic, and the connections are really wonderfully had here. And each of the trio, I think, adds its own unique addition and flavor and ambiance and performance values. I mean, I mentioned Anita Mui's performance here, showing a kind of dilemma and limitation, but also overcoming, or the possibility of overcoming these obstacles in this grand and heroic way that's still very believable and very approachable. And then we have Maggie Cheung, who has this wild, flashy role that is, in terms of the riding of the motorcycle and the physicality and the rugged nature to her fight scenes, which is so fantastic. And then Michelle Yeoh, who brings yet another degree of advanced form of physicality, and not just that, but the high degree of acrobatics combined with the fantasy elements of invisibility, as well as the deep-rooted emotional connections that she has with people like the James Peck character and others, the Professor Scientist character and others that become perhaps revealed along the way, thus testing her own allegiances and seeing the choices that she has to make. It's another fascinating performance. Absolutely great. So the pairing or the combination of these three, and the ways in which they are their own carrying out the action scenes, the choreography, they all have their own character, which I find really fascinating indeed. There's a type of acrobatic martial arts grace and elegance that is part of, say, the Anita Mui and Michelle Yeoh performances in particular. There's also a kind of magic fantasy element to that is introduced here, and then we have the almost the ballet the ballet grace that has a rugged charm of Michelle Yeoh, which is world famous, high class, world class, and it's out of this world, amazing. And then you have the superhero antics of Anita Mui, which has a sense of superhero fantasy magic to it, which is utterly believable thanks to the great performance by Anita Mui. And then as we have the zany wildness of Maggie Cheung's character. So and when there are the quiet moments between and among them, and they are very emotionally rich and quite powerful. And there are times too when this film takes some pretty dark turns. It's a subject matter that is potentially quite disturbing, and there are some choices that are made that themselves are really off the wall disturbing and quite unpleasant at times. And so we wince, we feel uncomfortable as viewers, but we also understand that our heroes feel the same way, and there are sacrifices that are being made for the sake of a kind of greater good or greater justice. And then the final climactic battles that are also martial arts extravaganzas that are so creative and over the top that blend into different various genres. It's just wonderful, wonderful pot filled with so many points of entertainment and movie references and the like. It's a delight from start to finish. That's some parts horror film, some parts science fiction film, some parts superhero action film, some parts martial arts film, some parts action adventure film with a little bit of hint of, say, Mad Max. We might get to some Mad Max references when we talk about Executioners, but they're still here as well in the heroic trio. There's a police procedural aspect to it. There's a the serial kidnapping aspect to it. There's the myth, legendary mythic film type of fantasy element to it in terms of the subterranean layers. There are the superheroes and supervillains, which I mentioned. There's also references to maybe zombie films and films like, say, The Terminator and the like. It's so fantastic, so great, and the inventiveness of the fight scenes and the choreography and the way that effects are blending in to the proceedings. It's so charming and so utterly captivating, and I love the feel of it. I love the palpable feel of this. You can see, I mean, sometimes you can see the wires, or sometimes you can kind of guess how the effect is happening in terms of a maybe pantomime trick or illusion, etc. But that's part of the fun of watching a film like The Heroic Trio, because you're still swept up in the grace and elegance of it, and you're also swept up and impressed by the theatricality and the effort in which these scenes, these moments are created. These singular moments are created due to a lot of time and effort and thought with regard to the choreography, the placement, and also the effects that are layered in. This is a delight. This is such a delight, and I'm so happy that this film is here in the Criterion Collection in this form. It is a real great film indeed, and it is this film, which is The Heroic Trio. The Criterion Collection has released this film, The Heroic Trio, courtesy of this, what I have in front of me, a 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition. And so that means the 4K disc, there's one 4K disc and there are two Blu-rays. So on the 4K disc, which is what I have now in the player, we have the option of watching either the Heroic Trio or Executioners. And indeed, as you can see here, it's another great artwork here that's on display, this time with the inclusion of both titles on the Blu-ray screen. And also the option of you can select the Heroic Trio or Executioners. So if I press Heroic Trio, it takes me to the film, and in terms of the setup. Let me speak about the setup because of the audio options that are available. We have the original monaural Cantonese available, also 5.1 surround Cantonese track available, and also the English dubbed monaural track available. So the three soundtracks that are available to watch. Now, with regard to the master restorations, I should quote it's not a fold out, but it's a poster fold out type of insert. I'll talk a little bit about that later in this video, but it does say on one of the sides of the back of the poster art fold out here, it says, about the restorations, and I quote, "The Heroic Trio and Executioners are presented in the aspect ratio of 1.78 to 1. These digital restorations were created from the 35mm original camera negatives and scanned in 4K resolution. The original monaural theatrical mix for the Heroic Trio was provided by Media Asia, while the one for Executioners and the English dub tracks were provided by collectors dedicated to the proper preservation of Hong Kong cinema. The 5.1 surround soundtrack was remastered by Media Asia." So, well done. I saw this film a number of times upon this release, and I saw it a number of times with each of the soundtrack options. So I must say I enjoyed the soundtrack options thoroughly. They give a different flavor, and also sometimes different naming conventions as well. For instance, the English dub has certain naming conventions versus what we might find elsewhere. So those interesting little similarities and differences, I think, are really quite nice indeed. And I think it becomes for me anyway, a very enjoyable experience watching the film either in the original Cantonese monaural mix, and also the 5.1 I enjoyed very much. And then also there is a wonderful charm with watching it in the English dub version here, which is what's made available. I must say too that I am very totally lacking in knowledge and my knowledge base and experience with respect to, say, the release history of this film, The Heroic Trio. So I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to be able to compare and contrast, say, previous releases of what's been made available and how this has looked previously. Although I can say, based on my own experience of watching this prior to the Criterion release some time back, this looks and sounds quite good to me, and I like I like the way there's a way in which it feels sharp and bright on the one hand, but I'm talking about the presentation of the picture quality, how it looks sharp and bright on the one hand, which I think is a result of which is a result, I think, of the restoration quality, which I think is quite high, but at the same time, there is this fidelity to a kind of a Hong Kong cinema, say, aesthetic, if you will, of a type of bright contrasts, or almost a shutter speed quality, which is seeming almost akin to a silent film aesthetic, which I think is very apropos as well. And so those sorts of trimmings and feelings, I think, are preserved very nicely, at least as far as I can gather in my subjective take on this. So overall, I'm quite impressed. Again, unfortunately, I don't have a good knowledge base in terms of compare and contrast with other releases, so I can't speak to that, unfortunately. But as far as how it looks and sounds, for me personally, I enjoyed it very much, and so I also enjoy the possibility for the various soundtracks which I've mentioned here. And now I have put the Blu-ray back into the player. Before I had the 4K disc in the player, but now I have the Blu-ray disc in the player. But specifically, I have the Blu-ray disc of the Heroic Trio in the player now. And so that's why you can see the Heroic Trio itself alone as the title on the Blu-ray menu. With the art design here, and the reason why I put it in here is just to show, for instance, the fact that you can watch the film on the Blu-ray again with the three options in terms of the soundtracks that are made available here as well. And then we have, unlike the 4K disc, we have both films, but we didn't have the supplements menus on the 4K disc, which is why I've turned our attention now to the Blu-ray. And putting in the Heroic Trio Blu-ray gives you the option now of accessing the supplements that the Criterion Collection has made available here. When I press this, we have two supplements. First up is Superhero Sisterhood, and I press on this and it says, and I quote, "In this interview conducted by the Criterion Collection in 2023, film critic Sam Dagan shares her passion for the heroic trilogy duology." Sam Dagan is a film critic, an expert extraordinaire, an author, a historian, a film historian, a very famous podcaster, and an overall great enthusiast of cinema. And so it's great to hear she just so many great takes and such great lights being shone on a lot of films that she and her fellow podcaster community and film critics are speaking about. So it's wonderful to hear her passion and her enthusiasm for all things cinema. And that includes, as we see here, her discussion of the two films here, the Heroic Trilogy duology, as it's mentioned here. And this interview with Sam Dagan is approximately 17 minutes, which is really nice. I should point out that, yes, this is a conversation on both films, so it's not Heroic Trio specific or exclusive. So perhaps it might be beneficial to have seen both the Heroic Trio and Executioners prior to watching this interview. But once you've seen the two, it'll give you a great frame of reference because, again, comments here are just so on point and so well expressed and so well said and stated. And an expert, absolute expert, and a wonderful job here. Again, this is the 17-minute interview here, speaking about kind of the style of Johnnie To and company, and how there are different mixes of styles and genres that are, for instance, as exemplified here in the film The Heroic Trio. For instance, a kind of pulp fiction style that's made apparent, I think, maybe in terms also, among other things, the convergence of different, say, storylines, different short stories that seem to be converging at once, as well as a comic book superhero aesthetic, which is very apropos and done so with such grandiose gestures and so lovingly and so thoroughly. And with a great unique style and twist that's also harkening back to a lot of the comic book traditions, East and West, I would say. And then also there is the tradition in terms of wuxia, and I think Sam Dagan's comments here are really great in terms of wuxia, not just as a cinema tradition, but also as a literary tradition. And there's some shots here which I really appreciate of some of the very famous books by for instance, Jin Young. So that's really cool. And then also speaking of the cinema tradition of wuxia, King Hu is mentioned, and the sort of lineage, the cinema lineage in terms of King Hu, and then Johnnie To in terms of future generations here. This is really quite wonderful. And then what's so great too about this is really putting these films, I should say, in perspective, from 1993, and reminding us of the state of superhero films in 1993, which I think she points out quite astutely was very different than the state of superhero films we might have found, say, in 2020, 2021, 2022, even now 2024. So very, very different. And so in that different climate, we have the emergence of films like The Heroic Trio and Executioners, and from the Hong Kong tradition, which is really quite fascinating how it's very much a Hong Kong film, and also borrowing from so many different genres within the Hong Kong film element, and then also borrowing from outside of it, say from Hollywood blockbuster cinema, but at the same time, again, remembering the 1993 context. And then taking into that, I think she really provides great further context into the performers, the actors, and the entertainers here. So, for instance, Anita Mui, who's a superstar, a big superstar in terms of her music and singing career, but then just quite maybe recently in relation to the making of the Heroic Trio and then the Executioners. She had just, I think, relatively speaking, just begun to gain a lot of prominence in terms of her cinematic performances. And the film Rouge, which is also something that we've spoken about in the Criterion Collection Physical Media Context. It's a great film, by the way. That's also spoken about here in terms of the great emergence of Anita Mui also as a cinema superstar. And here is another great example of this. And then we have the great mentioning of Michelle Yeoh and the wonderful the way in which this is very much a type of typical yet atypical performance that one might have been accustomed to in terms of fans of Michelle Yeoh during this period of time. And I love the dynamic of her character here. I think it's in many ways it's I mean it's such a dynamic role, and her kind of the ebbs and flows of her character really are what make or break a lot of the plot of the film. So a lot's riding her on her performance, which is fantastic, by the way. So, and then Maggie Chung, and the prominence and the fame that she had. In terms of other work, Center Stage, for instance, which is, I'm so glad that's mentioned here as well. So, and other works, just in furtherance of of this great discussion, other works are mentioned here, like Chinese Ghost Story. It's great, and the contribution of Ching Soo Tung in terms of the martial arts, which will also be very very important too in terms of the producer and director co-credit of the next film, Executioners, in terms of Ching Soo Tung and Johnnie To together. Really, really quite wonderful. There are also some comments that are made with respect to Executioners, which is the second film, which we'll talk about in a separate video. So I'll right now just maybe skip over some of those comments for now, except to say that they are, I think, so on point and so apropos. And just a little bit of a teaser for what is to come. Again, for those who have not yet seen the film Executioners, you're in for a real treat. There's a lot of stuff that's the same, but there's a lot of stuff that's different. So it's a really great combination too. So I think this is a fantastic interview discussion with someone, Sam Deegan, who's obviously very much such an expert with respect to these works, and also Johnnie To, how these films figure into the dynamic of Johnnie To's filmography, and Ching Soo Tung, etc. So great stuff, expert through and through, and also very passionate about these films. You can tell that she has a great appreciation and love for these films, which I really appreciate and admire very much. So this is a great conversation with Sam Deegan. Again, talking, I think, primarily talking about these two films. It's approximately 17 minutes, so please check it out if you can. And then we have the trailer for the Heroic Trio, which is a very fun and delightful trailer. So, but that's it as far as the supplements on the disc are concerned. So it might look on paper to be somewhat light in terms of quantity of supplements. I don't want to take away from the quality of the quality of the tenor and content of the Sam Deegan conversation. It is really top notch, A plus across the board. A fantastic interview. So I don't want to take away from the quality of that. But if we're considering the possibility of other supplements, it would have been nice to have seen more supplements. It really would have. Again, it does seem a little bit on the light side, which is, again, what could we have seen? Maybe could we have seen others? Maybe there was Criterion able to do so. Maybe they weren't able to do so. I can only speculate. But just from a consumer perspective, from my own perspective, it would have been great to get the more the better, I think. Commentary track or without commentary track, or maybe some approach to the works of Johnnie To, or maybe approach to the works of maybe a discussion of Anita Mui or Michelle Yeoh or Maggie Chung, etc. Anything I think would have been great to further whet one's appetite in terms of the excitement. But oh well, don't fret, because as I say, we have the great Sam Deegan and her interview to guide us and give us further jumping off points in terms of further discoveries into the world of Johnnie To, as well as further considerations of the Heroic Trio and Executioner. So, but those are the supplements with respect to Heroic Trio. And just to conclude this part of the discussion, let me say that there is the insert, which is the folder. It's a poster art insert. We'll talk a little bit more about the insert. So it's replicating the cover art, which is, can you hear me? Here, sorry about that. It's the poster was blocking my path to the microphone here. I apologize, but the poster art here is there we go. It's showing the great artwork design. We'll talk a little bit more about the artwork design in a separate video, but there's also on the back an essay called "The Power of To the Power of Three," excuse me, and this is from the again from the great Beatrice Loiza. So we'll talk a little bit about this separately, but the essay does speak about the Heroic Trio, but it is also kind of a comprehensive essay talking about the two films in that context. But it's a great essay, but I'll speak a little bit more about it later with respect to that. So in terms of the Heroic Trio specific stuff as part of this release, that's what we have. I will have some further comments a little bit later about this, but it's great to have this film in this packaging in this way. I'm very, very pleased with this. Another work, in terms of the association with Johnnie To and company. It's great to have that furtherance in the Criterion Collection, as well as this great film with the superstars here that are just on top form from start to finish. So it would have been nice to have had other supplements, perhaps, that's for sure, but all in all, the opportunity to watch this film in this manner is very exciting indeed. So that is just some thoughts and comments about the Heroic Trio release from the Criterion Collection. We will continue with a discussion of Executioners, so I hope to see you at the next video, my dear friends. But until then, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including the Heroic Trio, including Executioners, including other works by Johnnie To, including other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. And so until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.